At approximately 13:30 hours on May 2nd, 1968, Staff Sergeant Roy Benavidez, assigned to Detachment B-56, 5th Special Forces Group, heard radio traffic indicating that a 12-man Special Forces reconnaissance team was in heavy contact with North Vietnamese Army forces near Loc Ninh, South Vietnam, approximately 20 kilometers from the Cambodian border. The team was surrounded. The team was taking casualties. 3 helicopter extraction attempts had failed due to intense enemy fire. Benavidez was 33 years old. He was not assigned to the team in contact. He was not scheduled for any mission that day. He was at the forward operating base at Loc Ninh monitoring radio communications. When he heard the team's desperate calls for help, he ran approximately 75 meters to the helicopter pad where a UH-1D Huey helicopter was preparing for a 4th extraction attempt. He carried only his medical bag and a knife. He had no rifle. He wore no body armor, only his standard jungle fatigues. Over the next 6 hours, Benavidez would be shot 4 times, hit by grenade shrapnel in multiple locations, struck by rifle butts, and bayoneted. Medical personnel would later document 37 separate wounds on his body. He would save 8 men. He would recover classified documents from dead soldiers. He would be placed in a body bag, assumed dead, before a doctor noticed him spit blood, confirming he was still alive. The action that would earn him the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration awarded by the United States, would span from early afternoon until after dark. It would involve 3 separate helicopter insertions into an area where more than 1,000 North Vietnamese Army soldiers were operating. This is what happened. Roy Benavidez was born on August 5, 1935, in Cuero, Texas, a small town approximately 90 miles southeast of San Antonio. His parents were Mexican-American farmers. His father, Salvador Benavidez Jr., died when Roy was 2 years old. His mother, Teresa Perez, died when he was 7. Roy and his younger brother were taken in by their aunt and uncle, who were sharecroppers near Cuero. Benavidez attended school through 7th grade. He dropped out at age 15 to work in the cotton fields full-time. He spoke Spanish as his first language and learned English primarily through interaction with other workers and overseers. He experienced discrimination common to Mexican Americans in rural Texas during the 1940s and 1950s, including segregated schools and limited economic opportunities. In 1952, at age 17, Benavidez was working as a tire changer at a service station in El Campo, Texas. His prospects were limited. He had no high school diploma. He had no technical skills beyond manual labor. On August 4, 1952, one day before his 18th birthday, Benavidez walked into an Army recruiting office in Houston and enlisted. Benavidez completed basic training at Fort Ord, California in October 1952. He was assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where he completed jump school and was designated as a paratrooper. In 1955, he married Hilaria Coy, whom he had met before enlisting. They would eventually have 3 children. Benavidez served continuously in the Army from 1952 through 1965. He was promoted steadily, reaching the rank of Staff Sergeant. In 1959, he was assigned to the 2nd Infantry Division in South Korea. In 1964, he was assigned to an infantry unit at Fort Sam Houston, Texas. His performance evaluations consistently rated him as an above-average soldier with strong leadership capabilities. In May 1965, Benavidez received orders for his first tour in Vietnam. He was assigned to an infantry advisory team working with South Vietnamese Army units. On his 2nd day in country, while on a road march with a South Vietnamese infantry unit, Benavidez stepped on a landmine. The mine was a small anti-personnel device designed to wound rather than kill. The explosion drove shrapnel into both of Benavidez's legs and lower back. He was evacuated to a field hospital, then to Saigon, then to Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas. Medical evaluation determined that he had sustained nerve damage and muscle damage in both legs. Multiple surgeries were performed over 6 months. Doctors informed Benavidez that his combat service was over. they recommended medical retirement. Benavidez was told he would likely never walk normally again and should expect to use crutches or a cane permanently. Benavidez refused to accept this assessment. Medical records from Brooke Army Medical Center document that he began an unauthorized physical therapy regimen. At night, when staff were minimal, he would get out of bed and force himself to move. Initially, he could only crawl. Eventually, he progressed to standing with support, then to walking with crutches, then to walking without assistance. After 1 year of rehabilitation, Benavidez was walking without aid. He passed a medical evaluation board and was cleared to return to active duty in June 1966. However, he was restricted from airborne operations and combat assignments due to his medical history. Benavidez requested assignment to Special Forces. His application was initially rejected due to his medical history. He persisted. In early 1967, he was accepted for Special Forces training at Fort Bragg. He completed the Special Forces qualification course in June 1967 and was awarded the Special Forces tab. He was assigned to the 5th Special Forces Group and received orders for his second tour in Vietnam. Benavidez arrived in Vietnam for his second tour in January 1968. Bayoneted was assigned to Detachment B-56, 5th Special Forces Group, operating from forward bases in 3rd Corps Tactical Zone, the region surrounding Saigon and extending to the Cambodian border. Special Forces in Vietnam in 1968 conducted multiple mission types, including training South Vietnamese forces, conducting long-range reconnaissance, and running classified operations across the Cambodian and Laotian borders. Benavidez was assigned to support reconnaissance teams operating under the Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observations Group, commonly referred to as MAC-V SOG, or simply SOG. SOG reconnaissance teams were small, typically 12 men or fewer, consisting of American Special Forces soldiers and indigenous personnel, usually Montagnard tribesmen or Vietnamese. These teams conducted deep reconnaissance in enemy-controlled territory, often across international borders where official United States military presence was denied. Teams operated with minimal support and faced extreme danger. Casualty rates for SOG teams were among the highest in the war. By May 1968, Benavidez had been in Vietnam for 4 months. He had participated in numerous missions supporting SOG teams, primarily as a radio operator and intelligence specialist at forward operating bases. He had not yet been inserted with a team into enemy territory during this tour. On the morning of May 2, 1968, a 12-man reconnaissance team was inserted by helicopter into dense jungle near Loc Ninh, close to the Cambodian border. The team's mission was to conduct reconnaissance of North Vietnamese army activity in the area. Intelligence indicated that significant NVA forces were operating in the region, but exact numbers and locations were unknown. The team call sign was not recorded in declassified documents. Team composition included 3 United States Army Special Forces soldiers and 9 indigenous personnel. The team leader was a Special Forces sergeant, whose name was not released in early documentation but was later identified in Medal of Honor investigation records as Staff Sergeant Leroy Wright. The assistant team leader was Staff Sergeant Lloyd Mousseau. The third American was Specialist 4 Brian O'Connor, a medic. The helicopter insertion occurred at approximately 0900 hours. The landing zone was a small clearing in triple canopy jungle. Visibility on the ground was limited to approximately 10 to 20 meters due to dense vegetation. The team moved west from the landing zone, conducting reconnaissance. At approximately 12:30 hours, the team made contact with a North Vietnamese Army unit. The exact size of the enemy force was initially unknown, but was estimated at approximately 40 to 50 soldiers based on the volume of fire. The team attempted to break contact and move toward a potential extraction point, but enemy forces had superior numbers and were maneuvering to surround the team. By 1300 hours, the team was encircled. Radio communications indicated that the team had taken casualties. At least 2 indigenous team members were confirmed killed. Staff Sergeant Wright, the team leader, was wounded. The team's position was being overrun. A UH-1D Huey helicopter, call sign unknown, attempted an extraction at approximately 13:15 hours. The helicopter approached the team's location but was forced to abort due to intense ground fire. The helicopter took multiple hits and withdrew. A second extraction attempt was made at approximately 13:20 hours by a different helicopter. This helicopter also took heavy fire and was forced to abort. One crew member was wounded by ground fire during the approach. At 13:25 hours, a third extraction attempt was made. The helicopter was able to land briefly, but the team was unable to reach the aircraft due to enemy fire. The helicopter departed without extracting anyone. Radio traffic indicated the situation was deteriorating rapidly. At the forward operating base at Loc Ninh, approximately 20 kilometers from the team's location, Roy Benavidez was monitoring radio communications. He was not a member of the team in contact. His assigned duties that day were administrative, processing intelligence reports at the base, but he had worked with some of the Americans on the surrounded team during training. He knew Staff Sergeant Wright. He knew what being surrounded by the NVA meant. At approximately 13:30 hours, Benavidez heard that a fourth extraction attempt was being organized. He ran from the operations building to the helicopter pad. A UH-1D Huey was on the pad with rotors turning. The pilot was preparing to depart. Benavidez approached the pilot and crew chief. He asked if he could board. The pilot, whose name was not recorded in initial after-action reports, asked what Benavidez intended to do. Benavidez stated he would go in on foot and help the team get to the helicopter. The pilot agreed. Benavidez had approximately 90 seconds before the helicopter departed. He ran to a supply area, grabbed his medical bag, grabbed a knife, and returned to the helicopter. He did not have time to retrieve a rifle. He did not put on body armor. He wore his jungle fatigues, boots, and a soft cap. He carried the medical bag and the knife. That was all. The UH-1D Huey helicopter was the standard utility helicopter of the United States Army in Vietnam. The UH-1D variant could carry 12 to 14 fully equipped soldiers. It was powered by a Lycoming T-53L11 turboshaft engine producing 1,100 horsepower. Maximum speed was approximately 125 miles per hour. The helicopter was armed with two M60 machine guns mounted in the doors, operated by crew chiefs. The helicopter departed Loc Ninh at approximately 13:35 hours. Flight time to the team's location was approximately 8 to 10 minutes. During the flight, Benavidez received a briefing from the crew chief over the intercom. The team was surrounded. The landing zone was hot. Previous helicopters had taken fire. The enemy force was estimated at battalion strength or larger, possibly 300 to 500 soldiers. The helicopter approached the area at approximately 13:45 hours. The pilot identified the team's location by smoke grenades thrown by the team. The landing zone was not a proper LZ, but rather a small area of slightly less dense vegetation approximately 75 meters from the team's position. The helicopter could not land at the team's exact location due to trees and terrain. The helicopter began its approach. As it descended below the tree canopy, enemy fire intensified. A K-47 automatic rifle fire and machine gun fire hit the helicopter. Rounds struck the fuselage, the rotors, and the cabin. The crew chiefs returned fire with their M60 machine guns. The helicopter touched down briefly, hovering approximately 1 meter above the ground due to vegetation. Benavidez jumped out. Distance from the helicopter to the team's position was approximately 75 meters through dense jungle. Benavidez ran toward the team's position. He carried his medical bag in his left hand and his knife in his right hand. He had no rifle. He had no grenades. He had no radio. Approximately 25 meters from the helicopter, Benavidez was shot. The round struck him in the right leg, entering the thigh and exiting through the calf. Benavidez continued moving. Approximately 50 meters from the helicopter, Benavidez was hit by shrapnel from a grenade explosion. Metal fragments struck his face, arms and back. Benavidez continued moving. Benavidez reached the team's position at approximately 13:48 hours. He found the team in a tight defensive perimeter, approximately 15 meters in diameter. Multiple team members were wounded. 2 indigenous soldiers were dead. Staff Sergeant Wright was wounded in the shoulder and leg, but was directing the defense. Staff Sergeant Musso was wounded in the chest and was being treated by the medic, Specialist O'Connor, who was himself wounded in the arm. Benavidez immediately began treating casualties. His medical bag contained bandages, morphine, intravenous fluids, and basic trauma supplies. He applied tourniquets to soldiers with severe bleeding. He administered morphine to soldiers in severe pain. He used all the intravenous fluids in his bag on the most critically wounded. Enemy fire was constant. North Vietnamese soldiers were attacking the perimeter from multiple directions. Benavidez treated casualties while under direct fire. AK-47 rounds were hitting trees and ground around him. He was hit by shrapnel from at least 2 more grenade explosions while treating wounded soldiers. Staff Sergeant Wright informed Benavidez that classified documents and radio equipment were with a dead American soldier approximately 20 meters outside the perimeter. Wright had been unable to retrieve the items due to his wounds and enemy fire. The documents could not be left for enemy capture. Benavidez moved outside the perimeter, crawling toward the dead soldier's position. He located the body. He retrieved the radio and documents. As he was returning to the perimeter, he was shot again. The round struck his lower back, entering near the spine. Benavidez continued crawling and reached the perimeter with the radio and documents. The helicopter that had inserted Benavidez had departed immediately after dropping him. It had taken too much damage to remain in the area. Benavidez used the radio he had recovered to call for another extraction helicopter. At approximately 14:10 hours, a second UH-1D Huey arrived. The pilot attempted to land at the same location where Benavidez had been inserted. Enemy fire was even more intense than before. The helicopter took multiple hits. The pilot was forced to abort the landing. Benavidez called the helicopter back. He proposed a different approach. Rather than landing at the same location, the helicopter should attempt to hover directly over the team's position. Benavidez would load casualties onto the helicopter from the perimeter. This would minimize the distance wounded soldiers would have to be moved. The pilot agreed to attempt this. At approximately 14:20 hours, the helicopter returned. It hovered approximately 2 meters above the team's perimeter. Trees prevented it from descending lower. A rope ladder was dropped from the cargo door. Benavidez and the mobile team members began loading casualties. Wounded soldiers were carried or dragged to positions directly beneath the helicopter. They were lifted up to the crew chiefs, who pulled them into the aircraft. The process was slow. The helicopter was taking constant fire. The crew chiefs were firing their M60 machine guns while simultaneously pulling wounded soldiers aboard. Benavidez was shot again during the loading process. The round struck his abdomen, entering the lower stomach area. Benavidez ignored the wound and continued loading casualties. After approximately 10 minutes, all the critically wounded soldiers had been loaded. 4 wounded soldiers were aboard the helicopter. The dead could not be loaded due to weight and time constraints. Benavidez made the decision to leave the bodies temporarily and return for them. The helicopter departed at approximately 14:30 hours. Benavidez and 4 other team members remained on the ground. The plan was for the helicopter to evacuate the wounded to Loc Ninh, refuel, and return for the remaining team members and the dead. Benavidez's wounds at 14:30 hours included gunshot wounds to his right leg, lower back, and abdomen, plus shrapnel wounds to his face, arms, and back. He had lost significant blood. His jungle fatigues were soaked with blood. He continued to function. The remaining team members, Benavidez, Staff Sergeant Wright, Staff Sergeant Musso, and 2 indigenous soldiers, established a defensive position and waited for the helicopter to return. Enemy fire had decreased slightly after the helicopter departed, but North Vietnamese soldiers continued probing the perimeter. At approximately 15:15 hours, approximately 45 minutes after the helicopter departed, radio contact indicated the helicopter was returning. Benavidez moved the team to a position where a helicopter could attempt a pickup. The team was now too weak to move to a different location, so the helicopter would have to attempt extraction at their current position. At approximately 15:25 hours, the third helicopter of the day, another UH-1D Huey, approached the area. This helicopter carried additional crew members to assist with loading. The helicopter attempted to land in the same area where Benavidez had initially been inserted. As the helicopter approached, enemy fire intensified again. The helicopter took hits as it descended. The pilot brought the aircraft down to a low hover, approximately 1 meter above the ground. Benavidez and the remaining team members moved toward the helicopter with the dead soldiers. They dragged the bodies across the 75 meters of jungle between their position and the helicopter. Enemy fire increased. The team was completely exposed during the movement. Benavidez was hit by shrapnel from another grenade explosion during the movement. Fragments struck his legs and back. Benavidez continued dragging a dead soldier toward the helicopter. The team reached the helicopter. Benavidez and the crew chiefs began loading the bodies. The dead soldiers were lifted into the cargo area. The remaining living team members boarded. As Benavidez was loading the last body, a North Vietnamese soldier rushed the helicopter from the tree line. Distance was approximately 10 meters. The soldier was firing an AK-47. Rounds hit the helicopter and struck the ground near Benavidez. Benavidez dropped the body and moved toward the attacking soldier. He had no rifle. His knife was in his belt. As the enemy soldier closed to approximately 2 meters, Benavidez pulled his knife and engaged the soldier hand to hand. The soldier struck Benavidez in the head with the buttstock of his rifle. Benavidez fell. The soldier stabbed Benavidez with a bayonet attached to the rifle. The bayonet entered Benavidez's upper left arm, penetrating the muscle and striking bone. Benavidez pulled the bayonet out of his own arm. He stabbed the North Vietnamese soldier with his knife. The soldier fell. Benavidez stood, retrieved the last body, and loaded it onto the helicopter. He then climbed aboard. The helicopter lifted off at approximately 15:35 hours. It had been on the ground for approximately 10 minutes under constant fire. The helicopter took additional hits as it climbed out of the area. The pilot reported that the aircraft had taken more than 40 hits, and that controls were damaged but functional. During the flight back to Loc Ninh, Benavidez remained conscious. He helped the crew chief treat wounded soldiers in the cargo area. He applied pressure to bleeding wounds. He talked to soldiers who were in shock, keeping them conscious. The helicopter landed at Loc Ninh at approximately 15:45 hours. Medical personnel met the aircraft. Benavidez helped unload the wounded. After the last casualty was off, Benavidez collapsed. Medical personnel placed Benavidez on a stretcher and carried him to the aid station. A doctor examined him briefly. The examination revealed multiple gunshot wounds, extensive shrapnel wounds, a bayonet wound, and severe blood loss. The doctor determined Benavidez's injuries were fatal. Benavidez was placed in a body bag. The body bag containing Benavidez was placed with other bags containing dead soldiers. Benavidez was still conscious but unable to move or speak. He could hear activity around him but could not communicate. Approximately 10 to 15 minutes later, a doctor was moving among the body bags, preparing to tag them for transport. When the doctor reached Benavidez's bag, Benavidez managed to spit blood. The doctor saw the blood, realized Benavidez was alive, and immediately called for emergency treatment. Benavidez was moved into the aid station. Medical personnel began emergency procedures. Intravenous lines were inserted. Plasma was administered. Wounds were packed with gauze to control bleeding. The doctor determined that Benavidez required immediate evacuation to a surgical hospital. A medevac helicopter transported Benavidez to the 24th Evacuation Hospital in Long Bin at approximately 16:30 hours. Benavidez remained conscious during the flight. He was taken directly to surgery upon arrival. Surgical records from the 24th Evacuation Hospital document the extent of Benavidez's wounds. He had sustained 4 gunshot wounds, 1 to the right leg, 1 to the lower back, 1 to the abdomen, and 1 that entered his buttocks and traveled upward into his lower back. He had sustained more than 30 separate shrapnel wounds to his face, arms, back, and legs. He had a bayonet wound to the left arm. He had a fractured skull from being struck with a rifle butt. He had numerous lacerations and contusions. Total documented wounds numbered 37 separate injuries. Surgeons performed initial procedures to stop bleeding, remove shrapnel fragments, and stabilize fractures. Benavidez received multiple blood transfusions. He remained in surgery for more than 5 hours. He was then moved to intensive care. Benavidez remained at the 24th Evacuation Hospital for 1 week. On May 9, 1968, he was transported to the 249th General Hospital in Japan for additional surgeries and recovery. He remained in Japan for approximately 2 months, undergoing 4 additional surgical procedures. In July 1968, Benavidez was transported to Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas, the same hospital where he had recovered from his landmine injuries 3 years earlier. He underwent additional surgeries at Brooke over the next 6 months. He received extensive physical therapy. By December 1968, Benavidez had recovered sufficiently to return to duty. He was assigned to Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio. He was promoted to Master Sergeant in January 1969. He remained on active duty, but was restricted from combat deployments due to his injuries. Of the 12 men on the reconnaissance team on May 2, 1968, 8 survived. 4 soldiers died during the action or from wounds. The survivors included Staff Sergeant Leroy Wright, who recovered from his wounds and returned to duty. Staff Sergeant Lloyd Mousseau survived but was medically retired due to his injuries. Specialist 4, Brian O'Connor, the medic, survived and continued his military career. The indigenous team members who survived returned to their units. The 4 soldiers who died were not publicly identified in early reports due to the classified nature of SOG operations. Their names were later released. Sergeant First Class Joaquin Rocha, 32 years old, from San Antonio, Texas. Specialist 5 Emmett J. Trapp, 23 years old, from Pennsylvania. And 2 indigenous soldiers whose names were recorded in Vietnamese without English translation in available documents. Initially, no Medal of Honor recommendation was submitted for Benavidez's action. SOG operations were classified. Official reports of the action could not be written in standard format due to security restrictions. Additionally, many witnesses to Benavidez's actions were indigenous personnel whose testimony was not considered sufficient for Medal of Honor documentation under existing procedures. Benavidez's action was recognized with the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest military decoration, which was awarded in February 1969. The citation for the Distinguished Service Cross described his actions in general terms but did not provide full detail due to classification. In 1980, 12 years after the action, one of the helicopter crew chiefs who had witnessed Benavidez's actions, Staff Sergeant Brian O'Connor, now a civilian, contacted the Pentagon. O'Connor stated that Benavidez's action warranted the Medal of Honor and that he was willing to provide a full statement. O'Connor's testimony, combined with newly declassified records from SOG operations, prompted the Army to reopen the case. An investigation was conducted. Statements were collected from surviving witnesses, including helicopter pilots, crew members, and surviving team members. Documents were reviewed. The investigation concluded that Benavidez's actions exceeded the standard for the Medal of Honor. The recommendation to upgrade Benavidez's Distinguished Service Cross to the Medal of Honor was submitted in 1981. The recommendation was approved by the Army, reviewed by the Department of Defense, and submitted to the President. President Ronald Reagan presented the Medal of Honor to Master Sergeant Roy Benavidez at a ceremony at the Pentagon on February 24, 1981, 13 years after the action. More than 400 people attended the ceremony, including military officials, members of Congress, and members of Benavidez's family. During the ceremony, President Reagan stated, "If the story of his heroism were a movie script, you would not believe it." Benavidez retired from the Army on September 1st, 1976, after 24 years of service with the rank of Master Sergeant. His retirement was delayed several years beyond normal due to his medical condition, as he required ongoing treatment for injuries sustained on May 2nd, 1968, and from his earlier landmine injuries. After retirement, Benavidez lived in El Campo, Texas, with his wife Hilaria and their 3 children. He worked for the Veterans Administration as a counselor, helping other veterans with disability claims and adjustment issues. He became active in speaking to schools, military units, and veteran organizations about his experiences. Benavidez wrote an autobiography, published in 1981, titled The 3 Wars of Roy Benavidez. The book described his childhood poverty, his combat experiences in Vietnam, and what he called his third war, his battle against bureaucracy to receive proper recognition for his actions and adequate medical care for his injuries. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Benavidez was a prominent advocate for veterans' issues. He testified before Congress multiple times on topics including veterans' health care, Hispanic representation in the military, and recognition of SOG veterans whose actions remained classified decades after the war. Benavidez maintained that his actions on May 2nd, 1968 were not exceptional, but were simply what any soldier would have done for his comrades. When asked why he risked his life repeatedly to save the reconnaissance team, he stated in multiple interviews, "They were my brothers. You do not leave your brothers behind." Benavidez's health deteriorated through the 1990s. He developed diabetes and heart disease, conditions attributed in part to injuries and stress from his military service. He underwent heart surgery in 1995. Despite declining health, he continued making public appearances and speaking to groups until 1998. Roy Benavidez died on November 29, 1998, at Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas. He was 63 years old. The cause of death was complications from diabetes and respiratory failure. He was buried with full military honors at Fort Sam Houston National Cemetery in San Antonio. His funeral was attended by more than 1,000 people, including Texas Governor George W. Bush, multiple members of Congress, senior military officials, and hundreds of veterans. An honor guard from the 5th Special Forces Group, his unit from the action on May 2nd, 1968, participated in the ceremony. Benavidez's Medal of Honor is held by his family. His uniform and personal items are displayed at the Fort Sam Houston Museum in San Antonio. The United States Navy christened a ship in his honor, the USNS Benavidez, a Bob Hope-class vehicle cargo ship, in 2003. A statue of Benavidez stands at Fort Sam Houston. The statue depicts him in combat uniform, holding the medical bag he carried on May 2nd, 1968. The statue's inscription reads, "For his unparalleled courage and devotion to his comrades." The Roy P. Benavidez School, a public elementary school in Houston, Texas, is named in his honor. Highway 99 in Texas, near El Campo, is designated the Roy P. Benavidez Memorial Highway. Benavidez's Medal of Honor citation reads, "Master Sergeant Benavidez's gallant choice to join voluntarily his comrades who were in critical straits, to expose himself constantly to withering enemy fire, and his refusal to be stopped despite numerous severe wounds, saved the lives of at least 8 men. His fearless personal leadership, tenacious devotion to duty, and extremely valorous actions in the face of overwhelming odds were in keeping with the highest traditions of the military service and reflect the utmost credit on him and the United States Army." The citation compresses 6 hours into a paragraph. The documented timeline shows that Benavidez was wounded at least 7 separate times during the action, that he continued functioning despite wounds that would have incapacitated most soldiers, that he called in helicopter extractions while severely wounded, that he engaged an enemy soldier in hand-to-hand combat with a knife while already wounded multiple times, and that he helped treat other casualties even after collapsing from his own injuries. Medical analysis conducted after the action determined that Benavidez should have died from blood loss alone. The combination of 4 gunshot wounds, massive shrapnel wounds, and a bayonet wound created blood loss that exceeded survivable levels. The fact that he remained conscious and functional for more than 2 hours after sustaining mortal wounds has been described in medical journals as inexplicable by standard trauma physiology. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to this channel. We are committed to telling the documented stories of Medal of Honor recipients, more than 3,500 stories spanning more than 150 years of American military history. Each story deserves to be told with precision and respect. Each recipient deserves to be remembered. Leave a comment below. Share where you are watching from. If you have a connection to the Special Forces, to SOG operations, to Vietnam veterans, or to the Hispanic American military community, share it with us. Many of you are veterans. Some of you are active duty. Some are family members of those who served. Some are simply people who want to understand what these individuals did and why their actions matter. On May 2nd, 1968, in the jungle near Loc Ninh, 4 soldiers died. Their names were Rocha and Trap, and 2 indigenous soldiers whose full names are recorded in Vietnamese. They were husbands, fathers, brothers, and sons. 8 other soldiers survived that day because Roy Benavidez heard their call for help, ran to a helicopter, and refused to stop despite wounds that should have killed him. The facts speak for themselves. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering.